The following story has been brought to you by StoriesToInspire.org.
So when the Baal Shem Tov was on his deathbed, so he gathered together a number of his great students, and he told each one what their shlichus, what their mission is going to be for the rest of their lives in terms of spreading the Baal Shem Tov's teaching. So, for example, to one student he said that your mission, your job is going to be to teach my Torah to as many people as possible. To one student, the Baal Shem Tov said, your avodah is going to do kindness to other Jews in my name as much as possible, and so on and so forth. And to one particular Jew, the Baal Shem Tov said, your avodah, your job, is to say stories about me for the rest of your life. Whenever you have the opportunity to say a ma'aseh about me, the Baal Shem, you say the ma'aseh. That was his job. So this particular chassid, that was now the storyteller of the Baal Shem Tov. So that was his, not only was that his spiritual mission, that was also his parnasa. He would go around from place to place and people would hire him for, parties or, Shabbatons to be the storyteller, to be the entertainment, to say ma'aseh. So there's one particular story, one event, where he got a letter in the mail from a particularly wealthy, elderly man. This person was having a 90th birthday, and he was gathering together his whole family and so on, and he wanted to make a whole thing of it. So in this letter, he invites this storyteller to come for the weekend to regale everyone with ma'aseh and with Baal Shem. It'll be a very nice birthday weekend. So fine, 100%. That's what the storyteller does. So he travels already Thursday afternoon, Thursday evening to, where the weekend is going to be. And he comes off the wagon, and the birthday boy, comes with his whole family to go greet him. Everyone's excited. And they have a whole tish set up, a whole party set up, and, the entertainment is going to begin. He's going to say ma'aseh. So the storyteller comes, and everyone's looking, everyone's watching, looking and waiting for that first story of the weekend. And he says, let me tell you ma'aseh. And he completely goes blank. This was someone, you have to appreciate it, that he spent years and years, amassing hundreds and hundreds of stories. And he knew them all by heart. This was his life. And all of a sudden he's there and just goes completely, he can't think of one story. So it's a little bit embarrassing. But, the family, they tell him, listen, you just traveled today, it's been a long journey, you're a little bit tired, so rest up tomorrow, we'll pick it up. So fine, he rests, he goes to bed, he wakes up the next day all refreshed, he has a whole bunch of stories he's going to say. Comes Friday afternoon, everyone gets together, time out, little hachanas for Shabbos. No, tell a ma'aseh, say a story. Completely blank. And now he's very embarrassed. Friday night, by the tish, say a story, completely blank. And this, every single opportunity that this person has to say any story, he just completely goes blank and nothing. Now, obviously that puts a huge damper on the whole weekend. Everyone's disappointed. By the time Motzei Shabbos comes, he's ashamed even to face the elderly gentleman that was putting all this together. But he has no choice. He goes over to me and says, I'm so sorry. I ruined your party. I ruined your weekend. I was supposed to come and say stories. I can't explain it. I have no idea why this happened to me. I have nothing. So the person said, listen, Hashem controls the world. It is what it is. It's nothing personal, obviously. It's a little bit disappointing, but it's nothing personal. Okay. He gets into his, and he says, I'm not taking any money. I ruined your party. I'm not getting paid for this, but it is what it is. So he gets into his wagon and starts leaving. After a few minutes, as the wagon goes down the road, so the wagon stops, and the storyteller jumps out of the wagon and runs back to the old man. And he says, and the old man says, what? Is everything okay? He says, I thought of one story. And he said, obviously, this is not for money, it's not for parnasa. I ruined your weekend already. This is just for free. I just want to tell you the ma'aseh that just popped into my head. And he says, I'll tell you the truth, it's not one of my best stories. I don't know if I've ever said it before. I don't even know the full story. But at least part of the story I remember. Okay, so what's the ma'aseh? So the ma'aseh was like this. I remember when I was by the Baal Shem years and years and years ago. The Baal Shem Tov once took me aside and he said, we're going to go on a trip together. I said, fine. So we get into the wagon. The Baal Shem Tov goes to the horses, whispers something in the horses' ears. The Baal Shem Tov gets in the wagon, sits next to me, and the horses just go on their own. And after some time, we find ourselves in a city that I never recognized, the storyteller says. And this was a particularly it was not a Jewish city, it was a non-Jewish town. Not only do we find ourselves in a non-Jewish neighborhood, non-Jewish city, the horse and wagon parked itself in front of the church of the town. And this was during Mass. It was on Sunday morning, it was during Mass. And so the whole place is full of, of worshippers of Goyim. And this was not only was it awkward for us to be there, but this is a little bit dangerous too. And so the Baal Shem Tov goes to the church, is what the storyteller is telling the old man. He says, I saw this, that the Baal Shem Tov went to the church, knocked on the door, and the secretary opened the door, sees this rabbi, and the rabbi, Baal Shem Tov is not going into the church, but he says, I want you to go tell the priest that I want to speak to him. Tell him Yisrael Baal Shem Tov wants to talk to him. And the secretary is like, he's in the middle of giving a drasha, he's leading the services, he can't, Baal Shem Tov says, do what I say. And he had those piercing eyes. Do what I say. Go tell the galach, tell the priest that Yisrael Baal Shem wants to talk to him. Okay? So the secretary goes, whispers this message in the galach's ear. All of a sudden the galach turns pale, runs out of Mass in the middle, sees the Baal Shem Tov, and him, Baal Shem Tov and the priest go to a side house, a side area, and they have a conversation. Now meanwhile the storyteller says to the old man, he said, I was sitting there waiting there for the Baal Shem Tov to come out from this private meeting. Must have been about an hour or two, a few hours. And the door opens, it comes out, and the Baal Shem Tov walks out, comes back to the wagon, and I see the galach, his eyes are beet red, clearly crying the whole time. And so the storyteller says, that's the end of the story. That's all I know. We went back home. Meanwhile, the old man is hearing this. The old man faints. Mamish faints on the spot. What happened? They revive him. And he says, let me tell you something. That priest, that was me. That was me. So the storyteller says, okay, so, this person is a professional storyteller. What's the end of the Maisa? Like, what did the Baal Shem Tov tell you in that room? So the old man said, listen, what the Baal Shem Tov told me in that room and what he said to change my life, to bring me from that place to the place that I am now, that's between me and God. I'm not going to say. But I'll tell you one thing. After the whole thing was over and I decided to return to Hashem, to return to the Jewish people, I asked the Baal Shem Tov, I said, Rebbe, how will I know what's going to be my sign that my Teshuvah has been accepted in heaven? When can I fully be at peace with myself? So Baal Shem Tov said, if at one point in your life, one of my students comes and tells you your story, that's a siman that you should be at peace. And so the old man said, ever since then, I've been hiring all sorts of storytellers, as much as I possibly can, to hear stories from Baal Shem Tov, hoping and hoping I'll hear my Maisa. And finally, this is the Maisa that I've been waiting for to hear is my story. However, I think this is the avoid of hearing a Maisa, hearing a story of a tzaddik. You're not hearing about a story that happened to a particular person a long time ago, that person was righteous and we're trying to become people like that. We have to realize, every Motzei Shabbos, this is the avodah, we have to realize that we are connected to the tzaddikim, we are a part of them, and they are a part of us. When you hear a story of a tzaddik, you're hearing your own autobiography. You're hearing your own biography. And you have to learn and you have to realize that the greatness that we hear and we remind ourselves of our people in past generations and past history, that's our story right now. And when a person hears their story, it gives them strength. The reason why we say stories Motzei Shabbos going into the 6 days of the week, the 6 days of the week is a dark time. It's a time of forgetfulness. What do we forget? Sometimes we forget Torah, sometimes we forget mitzvahs, sometimes we forget each other. And the deepest tragedy is sometimes we forget who we are. When you say a Maisa, Motzei Shabbos, of Tzaddikim, we're reminding ourselves of who we are, what we're capable of, what's really beneath the surface of our own souls and our own consciousness. Hashem should bless each and every one of us by telling stories of Tzaddikim, by believing in Tzaddikim. We should hear our stories in them, our stories in their stories, and have the strength to remember who we are throughout the course of the 6 days of the week. A good tvach, a gebench tvach, a lichte gevach.
Enjoyed this story? Come again. Bring a friend. StoriesToInspire.org